We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hey everyone, and welcome. It has been a while. It has been a minute. It's been a month since we had this show. I was traveling most of September. It's been a whirlwind of the past 4 to 5 weeks, and I am so excited to be back here. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Maureen, I appreciate the enthusiasm and like the 5 exclamation points. I have missed you. Having you as part of this conversation. Lisa, welcome. Jeff, wonderful to have you here. Nathan, I know you are as excited as Tim and I are for this conversation today and to be back and doing the show and being with all of you. This community has been so amazing over the past 2 years that we've been having the show and having these conversations and talking about what it means to be unmuted, to unmute ourselves at work and in our relationships and our creative expression, our emotional expression. And I've missed this. I've missed being with all of you. Since the last show that we had, my second song came out, so Didn't See It Coming, released on September 25th, 26th. I was in San Diego with Raquel Boris, and it was a LinkedIn friend who I'd never met in person, and we got to hang out together and celebrate the release together and get pedicures together. And it was just this really cool example of what can happen when we build community really intentionally. So you can check out that song wherever you stream music. And again, let us know in the comments. Let us know where you're joining us from today. Let us know that you're here. It's so wonderful to see some familiar and some new faces that are joining us for the conversation today. So yeah, the song came out. More about that. I will share more about that in a future episode, just a bit more about the backstory and how the song came together, how it came to be. And wanted to let you know that my next song is coming out in November. And I think it's going to be called Light Bulbs. We haven't officially decided on the title yet, but we're going to finalize some of the vocals coming up in the next week. And so I cannot wait. Lisa, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we've got coast to coast. We've got from Pittsfield, Mass to Santa Monica, California. Hey, Tom, good to have you here. Bay Area. I know we've got Nathan in Colorado, and then we've got Maureen in Chicago. So I love that we can go coast to coast with this conversation today. So I wanted to mention that, just some exciting things that are coming up, and I'll be sure to share that music as soon as it releases, and hopefully be able to do even like a release party maybe on here for the third song. So today's conversation, it's really interesting the way this worked out. I had every intention of squeezing in some shows when I was traveling to California and Detroit and Chicago, wherever else I was over the past month. And it just didn't happen. And so interestingly, the last guest that we had on the show is actually the spouse, the wife of the person that we have on our show today. And so the way that worked out is really cool. And you are in for a real treat today. because, and I appreciate this, the comment, and across the pond, of course, we are grateful for our across the pond guests. And I'm coming across the pond, actually. Bill and I are going to London for Christmas. So really excited about that. So welcome, Emily. Good to have you here. So today's guest is someone I have known for almost my whole life. I'd say probably since I was 5 years old, if I had to guess. And to be able to see what he has, who he has become, what he stands for, what he has accomplished, the impact that he has had locally, nationally, globally with the work that he does, the mission that he has, is truly inspiring. So we both have in common that we grew up in Baltimore City, and something that has always been something that, and I shared this in the bio for the promoting the show today, is that he's really somebody who is a connector, somebody who looks at division and asks, how can we build bridges? And I think that especially now, that is needed now more than ever with the unrest that's going on in the world. And a lot of that building bridges can happen at home. It happens in our most intimate, our most important relationships. When we ask, well, what can we do in the world? What can we do to have an impact? We can start with ourselves. And we can start with how we're showing up for the people that we love the most. And we can start by doing our inner work and showing up in a way that is intentional and in a way that is just committed to the journey of healing and growth. And there's so much more I could say about this person beyond that, but I just wanted to give a little bit of that because I think that's going to really tee up our conversation well today. Just a little bit of background, something that in terms of what he does and from a work perspective and how he has an impact on the world. He was really bothered by how real estate and the control of land seemed to have done more to divide people than bring them together. So in 2007, he moved back to Baltimore after spending time abroad, working with helping bringing children together from war-torn countries through sports. And he helped to start Seawall, an impact-driven company made up of passionate social entrepreneurs who believe in reimagining the real estate industry as we know it. And again, as I mentioned, he is the proud husband of Lola Manekin, who was our last guest on the show, and the father of Durbin and Finley Manekin. So without further ado, please welcome my friend Thibault Manekin to the show.
Rachel,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm great.
I was thinking, listening to your intro, the minute and a half pre-recorded piece that you have, that I need to start playing that every morning when I wake up, or on my drive to work, or all of us should have that minute and 30 seconds in our ear and in our heart to start our journeys of every single day. Every word you said, it was beautiful.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Daniel Hall, there's a guy named Daniel Hall who put together the intro video. And I said, I'm just going to send you some stuff that I want to say, that I feel convicted by, that I really deeply believe in my bones. And can you put it together and turn it into something beautiful? And that's like what he does. And so that's what he did. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. Look,
talent.
You did it. You did it.
Thank you.
Daniel helped,
Thanks.
but those words are there because of you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know there's people here that have heard that. I think my friend Zach Demopoulos, there's certain people that come on here. Rich is here. Welcome, Rich from Wisconsin, that, have said, every time I hear that, I still get chills. And there's people that consistently have heard that dozens of times. And they're like, and I still, depending on what kind of day you're having or what kind of moment you're in, certain words can hit you in a different way.
Yeah. I'm actually going to start playing that for my kids.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing. Well, I'll find a way to clip it and just send you just that part of it. So stay tuned for after this. That's my commitment and promise that I will get that to you.
I know Lola was on the show before and she's done this, but you're so good with songs and music. If you could fold those beautiful words into some sort of music, and it could be just spoken words with the incredible beats and stuff behind, I think that would really resonate with people.
Well, thank you. This is a note to self. I'm actually meeting with my producer on Friday. So this will be a conversation. He hasn't even heard that before, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll connect with him. He does all the instrumental behind all the songs that I produce. So thank you for this. This is like an unexpected little gift here. Leroy, we have something else to do. Oh, love it. Oh, I love it. Well, it's so good to be having this conversation with you. And the other thing I forgot to mention in our introduction, and I think I'll tee up the conversation we're about to have, is how much I've appreciated even just me and my husband being able to learn from you and Lola, and what you share and the work that you do to help people be more connected to themselves and each other.
Mm,
And I feel tremendously grateful for that.
mm.
Tremendously grateful. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a story, any story that comes to mind for you about an area of your life that you have muted, a way that you silenced yourself, and a journey that you went on to get unmuted.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Um, Look, I think that being married, being in sacred relationship is the greatest thing that we can experience on this planet, and I think that growing up, I have two incredible parents. You know my parents really well. I know your parents really well. And my parents came, I think our parents, but I'll speak only for mine. My parents came from this generation where marriage was a thing you did, right? At least that's what it felt like. That I remember my dad always saying that the secret to a successful marriage is being able to say yes, dear, all of the time, never creating conflict, never pushing back, and kind of like happy wife, happy life. And that was how I grew up, right? That was, how I witnessed relationship. And, for the longest time, that was my understanding of what a beautiful, normal relationship was. And I'm not taking anything away from how they did it, right? But, we take so much from our parents. And I met this incredible woman who was on the show, Lola, it sounds like a month ago. And I thought we were living the most incredible life, right? And we hit the 10-year mark, and Lola kind of turned to me and said, is this us for the next 10 years? Because I feel like our relationship is status quo. And I've never done anything status quo in my life. How was it possible that I let the thing that I thought was the most important to me become status quo? And so I trusted Lola's guidance and her process, and we ended up at this program out in California through two kind of teachers of ours today. The program was called Yoga of Intimacy. I was kicking and screaming. I actually did not want to go. I thought we were going to California to do yoga and be intimate with a bunch of people that we didn't know. That felt so far away from my comfort zone and anything that I wanted to do. And we went out there, and the weekend with them changed my life forever. They taught Lola and I this language around love, right? Around sacred relationship, around intimacy, that I don't know, Rachel, today how our world works without everybody being fluent in this language. And to a certain extent, I would argue that right now our world does not work. We are incapable of having complicated conversations without choosing sides. We're incapable of showing up in equanimity, allowing the universe to just bring us whatever information it has in that moment, and for us to hold that in our heart in a really sacred space. And they opened our eyes in this way, in our hearts and our souls, in this way that changed us as human beings, changed me as a husband, changed me as a father, changed me as a son, it's changed me as a coworker. And so we dove deep on this journey, right, of like, first of all, understanding it for ourselves and how it could fit into our own lives. And then I think the unmuted part was, with our eyes and hearts wide open, I now, in an unjudgmental way, was able to see other relationships from a different lens, right? I was able to see where this language that we had learned could really serve more people, right? And so relationships are hard to talk about, right? They're hard to talk about under the comfort of our own roofs, within our own homes, let alone, with friends and other people. And maybe someone was at the airport today, and I saw two people give the most incredible airport kiss. It's like they hadn't seen each other for years, and it was just such a beautiful reminder, right, of like that space that we can hold. And so the unmuting happened when I gave myself permission to kind of let go of my old understanding of what relationship was meant to be, to change that within myself. and then offer that with Lola as a gift to anybody who feels the need to receive it.
Hmm.
And, look, not everybody's ready to step into the space. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. It's sticky. It's really hard. It'll, to a certain extent, break you before it rebuilds you. And again, it won't be for everybody, but for those who are ready for that next level,
Yeah.
I would say that I'm in complete support and surrender of providing that space and that conversation and that deep hug, right? For anybody who's ready for that work. And it's really been life-changing for me, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the part of that, one of the parts I think people can really relate to is that kicking and screaming part, that a lot of times in relationship, there's like one person who who initiates, like, this needs attention, right? Like one person unmutes themselves first and says, this
Yeah.
needs attention. We need to do something about this. And then there's like sort of the unwilling recipient of that. That's like, what are you talking about? Things are fine. Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm curious, what has been the hardest part for you in that experience of shifting your perspective about what a relationship can and should be, or can be? And what are you most proud of when you think about how you've grown through that process?
I would say that the hardest thing for me, and the piece that I've needed the most reminder of, is this concept of being able to constantly show up in equanimity, which means that whatever comes my way is coming exactly how it was meant to come, and without me needing to be reactive to it, without me needing to take sides on it, without it upsetting me greatly in any kind of given way. And I think allowing myself to trust the universe, right? And everything that it brings my way. As hard as some of the things have been, and will continue to be, that there's deep lessons in every one of them. And, that's been the hardest thing for me to kind of let go of, be fully aware of and conscious of, and implement on a daily basis in my life, because I know it's true. The times where I've forced, the times where I've pushed back, the times where I haven't accepted what's been kind of brought my way as not the ultimate end all be all, but the necessary lesson to get to the next phase of wherever it was. There's been a relationship, again, as a parent, for this really hard work that we're doing around the world and through communities. There's going to be way more pushback than acceptance. So that ability to really kind of show up in deep equanimity has been my biggest teacher at this point.
And so what does that look like? I'll go to the second part of the question like in a moment, but what does that look like practically? So for instance, you have two young boys. And I think that's an area where it can be hard to have that equanimity, hard to just stay open and receptive, especially with all that kids are facing these days. I mean, there's so much, like, things we never had to deal with or think about, it's a lot. And so I'm curious I know we've got, some people that are parents that are on this call, and welcome Lenny. I see Lenny's joined us. What would you say, like, what's an example of something where that might come up, where there's a conversation or something that happens that could otherwise sort of throw you off, get you ungrounded, get you unbalanced, and then how you sort of come back to center and choose to deal with that in a different way than the reactive way that most of us deal with conflict or disagreement?
I think if we stay on the kids example, one of the greatest realizations that I had, as I was so excited to have children, right? What an awesome honor to get to shape the lives of these two little human beings. What I quickly realized is that they were going to shape my life way more than I was going to shape theirs. And the ability to let go of that, right? So we try to unsuccessfully teach from this place of lecturing. And when we're lecturing, we're showing up in this way where it's our understanding through our lived experiences of how we want our kids to understand, digest, and go through life. And what I've learned by doing it wrong for so long and also getting it right is that it isn't the words that we use that are going to help our kids find the path that they have been brought to this planet to be on.
Mm.
Right? It's our trusting of how they're showing up. And it's in our ability to really lead by example, right? For they are going to watch us way more than they listen to us. And again, I'll take that outside of kids. It's human beings, right? I'm assuming, I mean, you're an amazing leader, Rachel, right? Like I'm assuming a lot of people on this call are incredible leaders. And it's our ability to lead by example, right? We're in community to like, to pick up trash when we see it on the street, right? My dad told a really cool story the other day. Is, you know, everywhere I go, like I'm picking up the trash that I see because we don't want a dirty planet here. And I just picked it up because that's what I saw my dad do, and that's what I saw my grandfather do. But no one ever told me to pick it up. And my son was walking with his grandfather, my dad, the other day, and he saw my dad picking up trash, and he said, "Hey, Dad, you know, Grandpa, that's what my dad does too, and you know, I'm going to pick up trash too." So it's that ability to show up and kind of lead by example for our kids that has been one of my biggest lessons in this thing of equanimity, you know, and show up and you've got this when you start to have these expectations of what your kids are going to bring and what they're going to do, and then you start to try to influence that with your words, 100% of the time in my experience, that's backfired. But the ability to kind of let them show up or us to show up and let them watch our son, the work that Lola and I do, this kind of sacred intimacy work, there's a lot of presence practices, right? And we've all done that together, sitting face to face and really being in deep surrender and being able to share with your partner what you see in them in that moment. I see the most beautiful soul in the entire world. I see a medicine woman that's healing our planet. I see this singer in front of me that is going to, you know, bring life force energy to the people that her voice will touch, right? And allow them to feel too. So our kids been watching us do that for a long time, and our oldest son's got a little girlfriend now, and you know, there's like a really interesting stage, and he came back so proud. She came over to the house, and you know, she laughed, and he was like, "Dad, I sat her down on a pillow, I put her in front of me, and I ran a presence practice, and I feel." You know, I never told him to that he should do that, right? I think he watched Lola and I show up together in this way, and you know, for him that's a little bit of his compass now, right? That's a little bit of his DNA. Again, not because we told him that it had to be, because he saw the effect of how Lola and I show up to each other now as a result of this work that we're doing together. And so that's
way cool.
Yeah, it was really special.
That's way cool. Well, even like, and I would love to like go into a little bit more about just how that works. Like when we say presence practice, because I know a lot of times we can use like terminology and just to invite people into this. And Lisa has a question too that I would love to address. Maybe Tim, we'll take that off in just a moment. I'll pull it up in just a moment. Because I can see even in our own relationship, like with me and Bill, sometimes the tendency is when someone seems to be in a moment of a really highly activated emotion, that often our tendency is like, let me get rid of that for you, or let me fix that, right? We immediately want to go in and intercede versus be with it, right? Just allow it to be. And I think of even last night, one of Bill's, he's a teacher, and one of the fathers of two of his students suddenly passed away over the weekend. And he was like, I just had a conversation with him on Thursday at drop off, like with the dad. And he was going to help coach the middle school basketball team. The dad, they were in conversation about this. And he's like, and he didn't really come from a place either where it was okay to like express like sadness or vulnerable emotions, which will tee up the question for Lisa in just a moment. And I saw, and it's just sometimes you have these moments where you can see growth happen And you don't necessarily know, like with growth, it's interesting. You don't know that it's like happening along the way, but then you have these milestone moments that make you realize it has happened or it is happening. And, he came to me last night as we were just setting up some things in a room in the house. And he just said, I feel sad. He said, I feel sad. And it wasn't my job to fix that. It wasn't my job to get rid of his sadness. It was my job to just be with him. And so I just, when we feel sad, and I've had this realization recently myself, like I really just need to be held. And I've experienced this even in the work that I've done with Lola individually. Some of like the Align Energetics work I've done with her is that like something I really needed is to be held. And so in sadness, often what we need is that just the presence of another warm body that lets us know we're not alone. And so I was so proud of him for like even acknowledging like I'm feeling sad and seeking out, because often when we feel sadness, we go inside of ourselves and we retreat. And so I just wanted to, like, as a testament to this work, that the more we get connected to ourselves and what we're feeling and we allow, as opposed to try to fix, that it's such healing work, what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, and Bill has the tools to do this now, right? But to take that to another level is, and I'll tell you what I would do in this situation. Like I gave my first TED talk over the summer, and the TED talks are meant to be 18 minutes long, and you know the work that goes into a TED talk. The hardest thing I've ever prepared for in my entire life, and you're months and months getting ready for it, and the day comes, and I'm in Dallas, Texas for it, and I couldn't have rehearsed the speech more or the presentation or the talk more. And I get up on stage and I give the greatest talk of my life, right? And I look up at the clock and I have about a minute and a half to go. Everything's perfect. And I'm at 17 minutes and 15 seconds. And I've got 45 seconds to finish. And like I fumbled and rushed the end of it. I got off the stage a broken man, completely broken. I was on the ground in the green room, just like holding my head and like for like an hour. Depression like I hadn't felt before because I had put so much time, energy, and love into this, and I put so much huge expectations on myself for it. I flew the next morning to get back with Lola, and I said, "Babe, I need you to hold space for me." Right. So this was Bill's version of I am sad. And Lola and I have the tools to do that now. So, we sat face to face across each other on the ground. We had the container of a 20 minutes on a clock that would allow for that space to be held. And she held what would have been kind of known as the alpha pole. And in that stage, I would have been the omega pole, which is the free-flowing sharing of whatever's coming in. And, I started, I'm a failure. And I started hysterically crying, right? And as I'm sharing of how I'm feeling, I feel like a failure. Lola isn't trying to fix me in her share of, I see someone who's not a failure, I see an incredible man who's in touch with his emotions and inspires me every day. I feel unworthy of your love. I see a man who defines love for me, right? And so she allows me to like process all of the grief, all of the pain, all of the hurt that I'm feeling, and then like there's a shift, right? Because one, I feel very held, very supportive, and like maybe 7 minutes in, maybe 12 minutes in, that changes, and I feel so loved. I feel so seen. I feel so appreciated, and so that's the work, right? That's the presence practice. That's the tools that you and Bill have now. I didn't exactly see the question that popped up, but it's all, there's a completely different way to show up to life, right? Where we're not unmuting things, right? Where like everything that's coming is very real. And as society, as like human beings, we've taught ourselves to suppress so much. Women in particular, right? I don't know I didn't hear Lola's show, but like you guys have been taught to climb the ladder. You have to push so much of your beautiful, raw, flowing, emotional state aside, right? That it's unhealthy. And men too, we've been taught that we can't show up that way to the world. It'll be seen as less than. And in my experience, there's beautiful tools to hold all of that space.
Yeah, it's been, thank you for sharing that. And I will connect offline about, I had processed some things with her about my own experience of doing that, of the talk and just the weight of expectations can be so much, that it just kind of pulls us down if we don't meet our own expectations for something. It can be really hard and heavy, but just to be witnessed. I mean, so much of what I'm hearing you say is like, I think so often in our relationships, whether it's at work or at home, that even with ourselves, that we just want to get out of it so fast instead of recognizing that so much of the growth that we experience as human beings comes in being with whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I'm fresh off. Lola and I were over for a 2-day yoga of intimacy retreat this past weekend, so I'm coming off of it. And one of the big things that they spent a lot of time talking about is the importance of our discomfort. And I talk about this in my book, but like true growth only happens outside of our comfort bubbles, right? Outside of our comfort zones. And there is so much discomfort in the rawness of space without words, right? Space with just deep breathing and eye contact. And I just I'm such a believer in the importance of these uncomfortable moments as our greatest teachers. There's no rush to get out of them. There's nothing better on the other side. And they're beautiful gifts and invitations for us to step into that space, understand it for what it is, understand it for the lessons that it's in the process of bringing us, and really being comfortable in the discomfort.
Yeah, that is the hardest part of it. And it's at work too, you know what I mean? I think Lisa had asked a question, she said, how do you help people unmute themselves in a way that's non-judgmental at work? There's a lot of conversations about vulnerability and how it can build trust. So I'm curious, I mean, you're a leader in your, organization, and, I'm curious, how do you show up in a way that is vulnerable at work? And has there been any evolution in your own experience of how you show up in conversations that you might have? Because so often there's like, this is the way I'm at work, and this is the way I'm outside of work. And like, this is where I can be me. And then this is where I have to be a certain way. And so I'm curious, especially as in the position of leadership that you're in an organization, what's been your journey with that, of coming to a place of vulnerability, of helping to build trust with your team, by leading by example there too?
Such a beautiful question. When I started professionally, right, 20 some years ago, and even in the beginning stages of the Seawall work, like I was this like charge forward, nothing's gonna faze me. I'm always gonna be the most positive man in the room or person in the room, and I'm unshakable, right? And that wears on you, right? Like, look, that's a lot of my disposition. So like that comes somewhat naturally, but not all the time, And I think that I started to feel unauthentic to a certain extent because I wasn't able to really show up in the truest state of myself. And so this work around consciousness, right, has been such a game changer for me and how I show up to my colleagues here at Seawall. I will not hold back with anything anymore. Like last week on Friday or Thursday, I got my ass kicked the entire day. Like the day could not have gone worse. Everything that I needed to be yes was like a hard no. And two things, I have the tools for two things. One is to be in beautiful equanimity of the moment. Like those no's really hurt right now, right? Detrimental And to a certain extent, they're amazing gifts. Every no is going to open the door for so many additional yeses. But in that moment, even though I knew I was going to get to that stage, when people were like checking in on me throughout the day, I was like, I'm getting my ass kicked today. Like nothing is going well. This has been really, really hard. And so we do a lot of this work at Seawall today. A couple weeks ago, we had a post summer. There's kind of 2 starts to each year, in September and then in January, right? And so we all got together, and Lola held a breathwork journey for us, right? Which is a real heart opener. And so I don't know, there's 25 of us in a room, eye masks on, lying down for an hour, hour and a half in this deep meditative state that allows us to tap into our subconscious and feel things and find questions that we didn't even know we had and answers to them. And so we go through that, and then after that we go around in the circle, and it's a kind of a 5-minute check-in with everybody of how you showing up, how are you, how are you really, and from people who have just had a miscarriage, right, to people who have just been married, to people who feel like work's been just beaten on them month after month after month. And to be able to have it in that safe space, that safe container, right, with 25 of hopefully the people that we love most on this planet, and having them show up in their most raw, authentic self. Like that wasn't an option 10, 15 years ago when we started our company. We didn't have the tools and the language and the ability to hold that space comfortably. That's uncomfortable space.
Yeah.
And I love the culture that exists here now that allows us at any moment. There's a lot of crying in this office, tears of joy, tears of pain, because I think that container has been set that, we're only as good as our ability to show up in our most authentic space and our most authentic self. Yeah. Anything short of that is a disservice to the people in the communities that we serve, to the buildings that we build, to the teams that we assemble, to the people that live and work and shop in our spaces.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a game changer for me personally, just the ability to show up that way. And then I think for all of us here in this space.
Yeah, what a gift, because most people are dealing with those things anyway. It's like people are walking to the door at work or showing up on Zoom. They're feeling those things anyway. And we can either acknowledge them or we can expect people to act like they're not happening. And to expect them to, well, can you just show up? Can you just like put that over here and then just get your stuff done? Because we need you to be productive.
Yeah.
And that happens so often at work. And it's so sad to me, right? Like that so many people, I think the majority of people in the work world feel like they have to show up that way at work.
Yeah.
That they can't show up. So I guess any insights for someone, I would often think of just talking to, like, who's one person that you trust the most that you feel like you could begin to share a little bit of yourself with? Like, because I know when I started being vulnerable, it was like kind of frowned upon when I was in my corporate job and I burned out and got mono in 2017. And I was the director of well-being. Irony of that is not lost on me. And I started writing about it and I started talking about it and I started doing presentations about beating burnout. And I got pushback because it was like, said about me, Rachel's the wellness person. Why is she talking about burning out? I was like, I think if I'm not talking about it, I'm not sure who's going to talk about this, because this is kind of like my job is wellness. And so I know I'm not alone in feeling that way, that a lot of people feel like, well, I cannot let people see this part of me, because if they do, my fear was they're going to think I'm incompetent. They're going to think I'm an imposter. They're going to think I'm a total fraud. Like, she's the wellness person and she can't even take care of herself. Like, what kind of example are you trying to set here? So I'm just curious what you would say if you had somebody, maybe a new team member, come in who's worked in an organization that maybe isn't as supportive, and they're maybe a little hesitant and they're a little bit like guard up, wall up. how might you invite that person into that safe space in a way that's maybe like initially gradual? I'm just curious if anything comes to mind for you.
Yeah, it goes back to what we talked about kids at the beginning of this conversation, is that you can't tell somebody how to show up, right? You can only show up and see if that resonates with that person, right? It's that leading by example. So we get new team members all the time, and this like woo-woo way of showing up, right, isn't for everybody. But
Yeah.
you sit through that first breathwork session and everybody goes around. I'd be hard pressed to think of a time where that new person coming from a completely different culture of how you can show up at the workplace isn't going to share a little bit more than they would have originally thought they were comfortable with.
Yeah.
It might not be deep end sharing, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I bet by the second time they show up that the training wheels are off and the heart's open and they know that that safe space has been created. You know, trust is at the heart of all of this work, right? It's kind of what one of the things we, in addition to love, it's one of the things that we want the most as human beings.
Yeah.
It's to be trusted and to be able to trust. When we have that perfect union of love and trust, but trust doesn't come easily for us. And to a certain extent, I understand why that is. We've all been burnt too many times, right? So, you know, sometimes it takes people a little bit longer, but I love seeing new folks come in. We had a new guy start the week before the breathwork session we were going to do. And for a number of reasons, one, they couldn't make it, and two, I didn't want to force it, but that wasn't the right time for them to show up in that space. You know, they'll start to pick up on the culture of just being with us in the office. Yeah. And then by the next time we do it, for sure, I think it'll be a more comfortable introduction to this kind of work.
Yeah. I appreciate that too, because like the readiness, it has to, or the willingness. Maybe someone doesn't feel totally ready, but maybe they're still willing. I think those things can be a little bit different. Like you may not feel like you're ready to do a thing, but just having the willingness. Like I think of the first time Bill and I went on a couples retreat. It was in 2013. We'd been married for 2 years. And I said, I had seen what my parents had gone through. My parents, oddly enough, so everyone who's with us today, this is a really interesting, just little side story, is that my parents went through a rough patch in their marriage when I was 5. They separated briefly and they got back together, and they had a renewal of their vow ceremony at in your family's yard. Which is just like kind of wild, that connection. And so I saw this thing that was like really broken. And when you're 5, that's when your core beliefs are forming about if the world is safe or not. And when you see your nuclear family breaking down when you're 5, that's like really traumatic. That's very, very scary. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I also saw that things can be redeemed. That something can be redeemed. And so I learned this lesson at 5 or 6, that like something that is really hard, that we can go through really hard things that we almost feel hopeless about, which is what can happen when, you know, someone's in that situation, perhaps in a relationship. And it is possible, it's not always the case, right? That's not always the outcome. It's not always the ideal outcome, but in that particular situation, it was for my parents coming together. And so I had seen them work on their marriage from the time I was very little. And so when Bill and I had a difference in ways that we communicated, like quite different the way that we communicated, we'd been together for 7 years, married for 2. And I said, like, do you want to go on this retreat called Getting the Love You Want? Because it really helped my parents communicate better. And I know the initial thought was like, well, if we're going to something like that, something must be horribly wrong. Because in our society, usually that's when do we make an investment in our most important relationships? When it's like literally on its last leg, then we will put the investment in. And I was 29, I guess at the time, and I had seen what happened to my parents. And I was very aware of how intentional we need to be in that relationship if it's going to if you're not just going to be roommates, you know, like if you're going to be more than roommates, which I absolutely knew that I wanted in a marriage. And it took us 6 months to get to the point where he was like, okay, I'll do that. Like I had to call and make sure, like, are we going to have to talk in front of 200 people? Who else is going to be there? What's the stat? And I, without judgment, I didn't say, you're being ridiculous. Why don't you just go? He had legitimate concerns. And I thought, well, what can I do to be supportive? I can go to this place and ask these questions and get answers for him so he feels safer, right? Coming back to safety. So he feels safer. And so that he's trusting that I'm not just trying to like throw him into this thing, but he's trusting that I'm doing this for the best interest of us. And that experience was absolutely a catalyst. We came back from that. They have a challenge they have called the Zero Negativity Challenge that we did, which basically was if you had a moment where there was like an ouch, right? Where you did something, even if your intent was not an ill intent, and it hurt the other person in some way, we had this calendar, we put stickers on it, and we put smiley faces on the days where like there was none of those ruptures happened. And then if there was a moment where like I was snarky to him or I did something, even if I wasn't intending it to be negative, he experienced it negative, it was an ouch, we put like a little sad face, and then we had a construction hat and we had learned how to repair the rupture. And after a month and a half of doing that, we had our friends, one of our friends commented, who hadn't known us for that long, known us for about 2 years. She said, something is different between you two. And it was like, yeah, we're so committed to this. We're so committed to us, and we're so committed to being mindful of how we're showing up for each other. And I think that groundwork was laid 10 years ago to allow us to be able to come into a space with you and Lola where we're doing these practices where we're sitting. I'd be curious if you could guide us through just like even one of the most basic processes or practice parts of that practice and why it's effective and why it works. Maybe the see, feel part of the practice, because I really believe that the work that we did leading up to this really helped us to be able to be more present for that and to continue to evolve our ability to connect with each other.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll give some examples. And I want to pick up on something that you said, which is the thing that will do the most in life done well, right, is be in sacred relationship, be married, right? Like nobody gets married to get divorced. And it's the thing that we focus on the least, right? It's the thing that we study the least. As you said, we only spend money on it when it's completely broken, almost past the point of no return. It's awesome that you and Bill jumped into it early enough. But usually most couples go into any kind of therapy or retreats or anything once it's gotten to a point where it feels like insurmountable, right? And why is that? You know, why isn't it why don't we teach this work in high school? You know, why isn't this like mandatory work in college? This is life's work that we're, for some reason, pretending is irrelevant, or that we pretend we all know how to do it because we've watched others do it and nobody's doing it great, right? So, you know, there's countless examples of these kind of practices that we can do, and I kind of alluded to one of them, and I'll fill in some more details. But you know, so Lola and I carve out about 2 hours together every Friday, right? And look, some people do it in the mornings, some people do it late in the evenings. Kids factor in, other commitments factor in. But if we can't commit 2 hours or an hour or 20 minutes to ourselves several times a week, then we're really not committed to the work and to our relationship. And so for us, it's a 2-hour block. And in this case, there won't be any kids around. And we'll sit across from each other. And, you know, a big part of this work is ensuring that there's polarity in the home, right? Polarity in the relationship. If the masculine in our work is defined as alpha, and the feminine is defined as omega. You can refer to whatever you want. In order for there to be polarity, excitement, fire, charge in a relationship, there has to be a great deal of polarity. You know, if both people in a relationship are showing up in the feminine pole or the omega, it's going to feel really good and tender, but there's not a lot of charge and energy in that, right? And if both people are showing up in their strong alpha masculine pole, which Lola and I do all the time, she's a very powerful alpha driven woman, then it's going to be a lot of like headbutting, right?
Yeah.
The ability and the gift to show up, to call that, right? A lot of times Lola and I will be in space and we'll get ready to be doing something, and we'll say, let's just be very aware that we're going to show up for the next hour together in alpha, right? There'll be no polarity, no sexual charge or energy in that moment, in that relationship, and then having the tools to step out of that once we're through that. And so we'll sit in across from each other, and for most of the exercises, I'll hold the alpha pole, which is the unbreakable, pure consciousness, a rock of trust and support. And it allows Lola to sink into this beautiful omega flow state where it's just pure love. Whatever shows up in that moment for her is more than welcome. And so sometimes it's just, we'll set a timer, a 20-minute container, and sometimes we'll just literally breathe together. And again, I'll be motionless, and we'll connect eye to eye and breath to breath. And that consciousness of just breathing and seeing each other for 20 minutes has this profound effect on us. And sometimes we don't need any more than that. Sometimes it's the I see, I feel practice, where we'll take turns. First 10 minutes, I'll share what I see, and she'll share what she feels. And then we'll switch. And the end result of the charge that gets generated in that 20 minutes is, there's no words to describe it. We're like inseparable at the end of it. And it's a beautiful reminder on a weekly or on a daily basis of, with all of the distractions, all of the things flowing around us, the ability to come back in present moment with the person that means the most to us on this planet is such a gift.
Yeah, it is. And, I so appreciate I remember I was at an event a couple of years ago, and one of the things we had to do, we were matched up with a partner. So this wasn't even somebody that we knew well. And we made eye contact for 3 minutes, unbroken eye contact for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It would have been more helpful if we'd been told to breathe together, because that would have, I think, just helped to create even more, connection. But there were people that were like weeping at the end of 2 minutes, just to have, I don't want to say just, to have another person be with them and look into their eyes. It's just something we don't do. We're looking at our phones, we're looking at a device, we're looking at a TV, we're looking at something else other than the other person. So for anyone who's listening, to think through, like, when is the last time you sat across from, whether you have a partner, if you don't have a partner, if there's another person in your life that you really love deeply, when's the last time you sat with them and like looked in their eyes? And I know our temptation is to get like giggly, and I know you've seen this in the work that you've done, that sometimes initially it can feel so uncomfortable that people have to just like dispel that discomfort with laughter.
Yep.
But if you can get past that, to have the ability, and it's that looking at left eye to left eye, right? Like having that right part of the emotional part of your brain might be activated in that moment. That alone, to your point, people are like, how do I even get started doing this? Sitting with your partner, like across from them, for like 3 minutes even to start, and just try to synchronize your breathing and look at each other in the eye, and like just see what that feels like. Just notice what that feels like, because so few of us ever get anyone to look at us for more than 3 seconds at a time, I'm curious, because you mentioned sometimes you're like, that's what we do. Sometimes it's the breathing together and the eye contact. Why is that so effective? From what you've learned, I'm curious, like, why is it that particular practice of just of making eye contact and breathing with each other and kind of being in sync, what is it about that has such an impact on us emotionally?
I'll speak to that from my own lived experience.
Yeah.
My wife is incredible, and as I said, she's this career-driven, powerful, creative force, right? She's in creation all day long. And that's a little bit of, you allowed to curse on the show? I don't know. That's a little
You
bit of
say
like,
whatever you need to say.
it's a little bit of like, get the fuck out of my way.
Yeah.
I am taking no prisoners.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I love that about her.
Mm.
And I love her beautiful, soft, feminine energy as well, and that gets lost in this like power, go, go, go person. And I love that side of her, right? And so this intentional creation of polarity, it allows me to stand in like full consciousness as the like unshakable rock of trust that I know that she wants.
Mm.
And it allows her to soften. So as I'm like motionless, just breathing her in throughout this entire 20-minute exercise, she's rolling on the ground. There's tears coming out. There's deep laughter. She's dancing. It's whatever shows up in her body in that moment, she's in full expression of it, right?
Mm.
And like that is incredible for her to have, knowing that I'll hold that space for her. And it's an incredible feeling for me to watch that unfold in her, to know that I can hold that space, that like she can trust me enough to show up in her most authentic self. And it creates this magic between us that, 9 times out of 10, it results in the most incredible, passionate lovemaking that we've ever had,
Yeah.
like time and time again, I'm blown away by and we don't go into it expecting lovemaking to be the outcome of it. But it gets to this point that there's too much charge in the room. There's too much polarity. There's too much trust that's been built, that it just like kind of melts into this deliciousness.
That's awesome. And I think people are like, I think everyone wants that, but they're like afraid to admit that they want it, or they're afraid to admit that they don't have it. Because we see all these things on TV or in movies or whatever, in TV shows of like how people's relationships are, and we're constantly putting our own relationship like on this ranking chart that I don't know who invented, instead of really thinking through like, well, what would it look like for us? You know what I mean? And instead of this outward external comparison, like if you're feeling that there's a lack of some kind, your partner's probably feeling it too. Like if you're feeling like out of sync, if you're feeling like something's missing, if you're wanting to feel more passion, deeper connection, more safety, more love, more trust, relationships are bi-directional. So it's not like the other person, if they're really honest with themselves, is completely unaware of that. Like if they were invited into a moment to be honest about it, they would probably acknowledge like, yeah, or maybe they don't even know that it's possible. Maybe they come from a place where the best that we could do is coexist. And the idea of having anything beyond that is like this pipe dream for some people, that like, that's not really possible, right? That's just, some people have that, but it's not accessible for me. To even come to a place where you can believe that that kind of connection is possible. Because once you experience it, it's so transformational.
Yeah. And we don't have the tools to ask for the things that we want out of life, and so we hold those in. And what does that do? That builds resentment, that builds anger, that builds this feeling of being unseen. And so what this work allows us to have is the tools to ask for anything we want on this planet.
Yeah.
Like the weekend that Lola and I just came back from, I asked for some things I didn't even know that I had in me,
Wow.
and she did too. And you're able to ask for them from this place that there's no expectation that you're going to get them. This concept of equanimity. But there's the safe space to be able to ask for them, right? Knowing that you're not going to be judged, knowing that, again, that like you might not even come close to getting what it is that you're asking for, but you have the ability to ask for it. And so nothing is left inside of us. Nothing's going to build up and slow us down in this incredibly chaotic life that we have, right? And if we're not well as ourselves, if we're not amazing as ourselves, if we're not amazing in relationship, then how are we going to show up to everything else that we have?
Yeah.
Right? How are we going to show up to our coworkers? How are we going to show up to our kids? How are we going to show up to our parents?
Yeah.
And this work, it gives us the tools to leave nothing unsaid. And I think that's really important.
I think so too. And I think so, just to some closing thoughts. I mean, that it also, it's like one of our biggest fears is that we're going to be too much for somebody. You know, we're going to be too much. If this person sees this part of me, they're going to think that part of you is too much. And we're going to be rejected for it, or not seen for it, or not acknowledged in it. And I find what's so powerful about doing this kind of work, of being with each other in such a deep and intentional way, which again is so counter to how most of us show up in the world on a daily basis. Like, my goodness, it's so deeply healing. And that our greatest need as a human being, I mean, it's this combination between attachment, between being authentic, being connected to another person, being bonded to others in a deep way, and being authentically ourselves. Like, those are our two deepest, greatest needs, our attachment and authenticity. And that's what going through this kind of work can help us to show up as our authentic, connected self with another person.
And in love,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I think that's exactly what I think that's a summary of what you're saying, but we are so powerful when we feel loved, when we have love to give. Like, at the end of the day, that's all we want as human beings. You know, I watch this conflict all over the world, and people fighting for land, and people fighting for religion. And you know, at the end of the day, we just want love, every single one of us. And we don't have the tools to show what that love means to us. We don't have the tools to ask for it. And it's part of our biggest opportunity as human beings, to find that love.
It is. Well, Thibault, you teed this up very well. I was thinking about how I did a meditation this morning on the Peloton app. It was called a meditation for peace. And if we sort of full circle, going back to, I think, how we reconnected when I was in college, of the work that you were doing, playing for peace, building bridges, you know, between people, and the work that you're doing now in your own marriage and your own family, with other couples, within your organization, within the communities. I mean, it's amazing to just see, like, bridge builder, connector, love activator, right? If we can kind of call it that, that's what I really see it as. And so as we close, and we're going to drop all of your links, your social links, in the chat, people can learn more about some of the work that you've done. Certainly, if you just search Thibault, we'll put his TED Talk link in the chat as well. And then also, he wrote a book called Larger Than Yourself, that I would highly recommend. I've read it. It's a phenomenal book. And I'm going to leave us with this meditation that I heard today, that I think it's about 4 or 5 lines, that I think all of us, if we kind of put a hand on our heart and take a moment of stillness, that this is what I would invite us into as we close. May we feel the interconnectedness between us all, and remember we are not alone. May all beings everywhere, including me, be safe and protected. May all beings everywhere, including me, be able to live in the world peacefully and free. And may those who are suffering, including me, find peace and relief. May we all be held in peace and with each other. Thank you for being here today, for showing up, for sharing, for doing the work. I'm honored to know you. I'm grateful to learn from you. And I'm really excited to see what continues to unfold. And thank you. Thank you so much, Thibault.
Yeah, thank you for creating this incredible space. Thank you for unmuting so many people. And thank you for your courage. It really shines through you.
Thank you so much. And everybody, we'll be back here. I think it's in 2 weeks. Some date, maybe Tim will, things I should know about my own show. I think our next guest is on the 30th. Yeah, it would be Dr. Darian Parker, but more to come on that, everybody. And so with that, I'll send you all off with the the next song, which was Didn't See It Coming. So everyone, I'll send us off with that song. And again, Thibault, thank you again. Everybody, Maureen, thank you for being here. Lisa, Rich. Rich just put the book in my cart. Thanks to both of you. Great talk. So glad you watched it live. Awesome, Maureen. Thank you all so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
It was an ordinary Sunday, typical in every single way. You might say there was nothing going on, thought your life could never change in one day. But when you watch it back on replay and wonder what decision steered you wrong, if only, what did I, what if we, why me? Could it have gone any differently? I didn't see it coming until it knocked me down. It happened in a moment, the way I hit the ground. I didn't know what happened, and it was hard to breathe. Now I need the wind that was knocked out of me. You don't know how you will get through it. Seems like the pain won't go away. You feel numb and scared, defeated and alone. When you wonder if you're gonna make it, tell yourself you're gonna be okay. 'Cause you have made it through hard things before. If only, what did I, what if we, why me? Could it have gone any differently? I didn't see it coming until it knocked me down. It happened in a moment, the way I hit the ground. I didn't know what happened, and it was hard to breathe. Now I need the wind that was knocked out. It might break me down, but it won't break me. I didn't see it coming. I say who I am, not what happened to me. I didn't see it coming. What do you do when you get knocked down? Do you stay there on the ground, or do you rise? Do you rise?